rule or the act of controlling something or control understanding situation is the main the basis of this situation. And the last one function of communication is affective function. Affective functions helps us to express, to show our feelings, to build our emotional according situation, to change situation according some changing in emotional sphere. The following interrelated aspects can be distinguished in the process of communication. First of all, it's communicative. Communicative process consists in information exchange. The main principle, communicative exchange of information. Next one is interactive process. Interactive means act exchange, interactive. And perceptive process of communication includes the principle mutual understanding between different parts of communication, partners, yes, between people and so on. Communication is a specific way when individual transfers information from one place to another place, from one person to another person. Communication is seen as very important. Why? Because it can help an individual to understand, perceive what other people are saying. It also, communication also means that people can express their own needs, their own concerns, their wishes, their thoughts using the communication. Depending on the characteristic of communication, we can differentiate all communication into several forms. Of course, it's interpersonal communication. First kind of communication, interpersonal. Interpersonal is a process, specific process of exchange of information or ideas and feelings between two and more people. Very often this exchange comes through verbal or non-verbal communication, or it's better methods. Yes, verbal or non-verbal methods. Interpersonal communication has two subtypes. It is individual group and collective individual communication. In general, collective communication involves one or more senders and one or more receivers. The next group of communication is a group communication. Group communication is a mode of communication in organization, for example, between employers and employees, and employees in the teams, in the groups, and like this. Group communication can further be looked from a marketing perspective as communicating to a group of people or target customers in order to market a product. It's a group communication. They are very important, the different aspects of communication, what sometimes can be the main ideas of understanding communication, of using communication. The communicative aspects of personal contacts, of communication, yes, very often they are associated with revealing specific criteria of information process between people as active subjects. That is with the account of the relations between the partners between the partners, their purposes, their aims, intentions, which results in information transmission and enrichment of the knowledge, of the ideas with which the communicates exchange. It's the main aspects of communication. The means, the specific means, basic concept of communication, of the process of communications, these concepts are different systems and systems of science, or systems of language, in particular, as well as non-verbal means like mimics, like what else? Gestures, like posture, like system of organization, like paralinguistic systems, patterns, and so on. What does it mimics? Mimics, it's when someone copies the way in which the particular person usually speaks and moves, usually in order to make people laugh, and so on. Justice, the next patterns of nonverbal means, it's justice, it's a movement of the hands, the arms, of head, or etc. And all this movement help us express an idea of feelings, the specific posture when you are aggressive or when you're tiredness, and so on. Next one, pantomimic. Pantomimic non-verbal means, non-verbal meaning, means the telling of a story without words. For example, by specific meaning of bodily movements, or justice, or one of the more common criteria, it's a facial expressions, mimic expressions in our face. Next component is the posture. Posture of the partners, of the people, specific posture in the general concept, and the paralinguistic system. Paralinguistic system includes, for example, intonation, for example, non-verbal elements of the speech, like pauses, like intonation, I have already told you. And of course, the last one, the system of organization of the space and time of communication, for example, eye contact, the preparation to communicate, to meet with somebody, yes, when small, very tiny detail means a lot, yes, and so we feel it's in our non-verbal means, non-verbal. A very important feature of communication is of communicative process of communication is intention of its participants, of the part. Oh, sorry, wait a second. Do you see slide, dear students?
Yes, you can see.
You can see. Sorry, give me 1 second. Sorry, there is some problem with my computer. It doesn't work so fast as I want. And very about features of communication. And one of the more common and important is intention of its participants, of its partners. And this intention can influence one another and provide the ideal presentation in the partner with influencing the behavior of the partner. And important, very important, wait a second, give me 1 minute, 1 second. About communicative processes. So yeah, a very important condition of communication is not only to use of uniform language specific nonverbal communication, but also similar understanding of the essence of the communicative situation, of the main idea, basis of this communicative situation, the main aim of the communicative situation. The interactive aspects of personal contact consist in construction of a common interrelation. Very important, the motives and purpose of the communication from the both sides, from the both components of this communication. And according to this main idea, we can differentiate types of communication according next types, components. First of all, it's a concord. I'm sure that you know this term, and sometimes we can, besides concord, we can use term agreement. Then second one is competition. Competition means specific situation in which someone is trying to win something or be more successful than someone else, or be successful than all people in the group, and like this. It's a competition. And the conflict means an active disagreement between people with opposing opinions or principles. It is very necessary to remember that concord, competition, and conflict are not only interaction of two personalities. All three types, they can take place between parts of the group and between the groups in the whole. Interaction is observed in form of feelings which can both make the people close or separate them. The intensity of feelings influences the efficacy of the actions of the members of the group, and is one of the signs of social psychological climate, psychological components of the group, very important. I mean, this intensity of feelings influence. The perceptive aspects of communication is we can express them like the image of the other person, which is achieved by reading the mental features and peculiarities of behavior by the physical characteristic of the person. Perceptive, about the meaning of perception. In one hand, perceptive is very good at noticing and understanding things that people do not notice. But in another hand, at the same time, yes, in another hand, is aspect of personal context includes formation of this image in the general concept. This perceptive. The next question is about processes of communication. The process of communication requires at least two persons or two components of communication. Main mechanism of learning the other communication is identification. Identification is the act of recognizing and naming someone or something. Next one is reflection. Reflection, or another name, understanding the specific criteria of subject is perceived by other person. Next one is a stereotyping. Stereotyping, what does it mean? It's a set idea that patient, that people have about what someone or something is like, especially an idea that is wrong. So there are definition in your screen, reflection and stereotyping. You can make photo screen of your screen there and use this information. More detail about identification, which I have already discussed, is identification, a very important processes. It's reflection, stereotyping, and identification. Is a process of learning. Sometimes we can speak that the process of learning quality on the basis of which the personality can be classified. Two mechanisms, I mean identification and reflection, are mainly performed subconsciously. And this is the main principle of them, subconsciously. That is why the mistakes and evolution of the people are frequent. They from stereotypical ideas. This is an identification mechanism of communication. When we speak about process, when we speak about effects which develop in the process of communication and cognition, we must notice that there are several effects like priority, like hello, and like novelty. Да? What is mean priority? Priority means then something that is very, very important and must be dealt with before other things. It's a priority. Novelty, it's the quality of being new and unusual. It's a novelty. And halo means the cognitive impression of an impression. Also halo means the results of the influence of the general about some things. For example, some phenomenon, some person thinks on the perception of its particular private. It's the main effects of communication and cognition. One of the tasks of social psychology is working out the means of correction and optimizing personal contacts. Also, the social psychology can develop the main task of social psychology to develop abilities and skills of communication. Among a number of forms of teaching the art of communication, a significant place is occupied by psychological training. like mastering communication skills with the use of different programs. Personal contacts or communication, types of communication are the form of human activity. The human being is surrounded not only by the world of objects, but also by people. Here, this world is connected with both these components. These interrelations are established and developed through the work, through the training, through the just general activity. Common activity is not possible without personal contacts and information exchange. That is without communication. That communication is the basis kind of activity, of human activity. The main characteristic of communication as a sort of activity is that through it, the person forms his relation with the other people. Communication includes numerous mental and material forms of vital activity and is a need of a human being. Only mentally ill persons renounce real connection with the people, but with this they satisfy their need in context with the pathological fantasies. Joining into small groups, establishing contacts during common activity, people exchange information. Communication is always determined by the system of social relationships, but in dynamics in the structure of communication, it is impossible to separate personal and social. Therefore, social and individual are closely connected in the language. One of the most important means of communication, language, yes, is the most important means. The mechanism of language and its individual manifestation is speech. Language, what does it mean, language? I know that you have already successful passed exam and you know this, but we will just remind you information. Yes, language, what does it mean? Language is a system of signs which have defined importance and are used for transmission and storage of information. Verbal language belongs to the linguistic science, which are built according to certain grammar rules, and non-linguistic science, like symbols, like what else? Like different intonation and criteria, like this, yes, are copies the system of traffic signs. What about types of speech? In personal activity, in our usual activity, we use different types of speech. It can be oral monologue speech, it can be dialogic speech, written speech, and inner speech. When we speak about oral monologue speech, we mean speech like the speech of one person, for example, lecturer, or for example, narrator or speaker. When we speak about dialogic speech, it means dialogic speech, takes place as a conversational among several persons. Our written speech means different written signs, and written speech has its own construction characteristic. Sorry. And the last one, our inner speech. Inner speech exists only in our brain. This kind of speech is the speech to ourselves. That, for example, if patient has his own speech, it means that he speeches to himself or to herself, like this. What about functions of communication? Very important. One key ideas about communications and functions. Why we use this communication. The functions of communication are various, and elementary functions of communication is establishing mutual understanding at a formal level. This may be a nod, maybe a smile or gesture. This establishing mutual understanding, yes. Main functions of communication are social ones, as we live in the society and we solve our collective tasks and so on. We have service functions, like, for example, manager, like subordinator, like a doctor, yes, like a pupil. We have vital functions. Vital functions mean our neighborhoods, our customers, and so on. We have our family functions, like wife, husband, just relatives in general, yes. To fulfill a social function means to do what is necessary at the time, place, under under the given condition, according the certain laws on the one hand and customs on the other. The social function are subdivided into those of management and control. They are connected with the organization of the group activity. If we speak about, if we will come back to our information about different forms of communication, if we speak about interpersonal communication, it's necessary to say that interpersonal communication depends on the feelings of the person to his or her relatives or his colleagues or just strangers. They work out their strategy of communication on the basis of these feelings. It's a function of interpersonal communication. I mean that when forming the attitude to the work, the staff, the other person, and to the person, him or herself, emotional satisfaction with the contact is very important. The function of personality, self-actualization of personality consists of trying to act together with the rest, achievement, the purpose, or that purpose can be increasing the influence on the rest. From the moment of the birth, the adults encourage the child to establish contacts. The need in communication develops in stages. For example, the child uses different means to attract the attention of the adults before starting speaking, like cry, like smile, and so on. When the child is brought up properly, he or she gradually changes his mode of communication from aspiration to attract the attention of the adults to cooperation. It's a new stages for children, cooperation of the like one kind of communication. With the development of speech, communication becomes more effective, more productive. The function signs are an important component of the appearance in addition to anatomical features. They are mimics, they are gestures, they pantomimic, they gait, voice, which are a complex of signals inform about mental processes and states of the person. The majority of people concentrate the attention of the face of the partner, especially the eyes. Contraction of the facial muscles changes the look, which allows forcing the actions of the partner. The character of recognition of the emotional states can be of diagnostic significance. The clothes also influence the character of contacts, and it's very important sometimes. To establish normal interrelation between partners, between people, especially at work or at home, the culture of contact is very important, and it consists in the presence of tolerance, respect, tact, politeness, and so on. Communication begins with the perception of one another. Attention concentration is very important, which allows perception with the account of mental features. Communication will be effective if the first impression will cause the feeling of attraction. If it fails, the communication will be difficult. In any case, communication must be established and manipulated with the consideration of individual features of the personality of the communication. Interrelations, like as one of the most important function of communication, can be richer if the people acquire the skills of communication and observe the rules and principles of cultured communication. Showing respect to a personal dignity and individuality of the personality allows improving the interrelations. All of you, I hope you know this proverbs, this idea that treat the people as you would like to be treated. And it is the main rule of morals, which should be the credo to for any doctors, any specialties. Yes, treat the people as you would like to be treated. So the second big part of our lecture includes information about basis of conflict study. First of all, let's discuss what is it conflict. Conflict is a collision of opposite aims, interests, thoughts, or views, or the subjects of their interaction. The following stages of conflict can be distinguished. First of all, it's incubation. The second one, latent. Then open conflict. Then open conflict, then obvious stage, and the last one, aftermath. What does it mean, latent component? It means participants are not yet aware of the conflict, but hidden frustration may surface at any time. Open conflict stage means when that participants are aware a conflict exists, and obvious this obvious conflict behavior, yes, it's better called like this, means that conflict is open and can be observed. Very often members of conflict feel stress or anxiety or hostility and so on. And the last one stage is aftermath. Aftermath means outcome of conflict or resolution or dissolution of the conflict of this situation. There are several varieties of conflict. They are interpersonal, interpersonal, intergroup, interorganization, interstate, and international. All forms of conflict have the same scheme of conflict development. First, stage, maybe first level, sorry, not stage, it occurs. The second one is reaction of the parties, of the partners. The third one is the key cause of the conflict. The next one is suggestion about the conflict resolution. The next one is agreement with the suggestion, of the conflict. Next one is disagreement with the suggestion. And next one, control of the conflict. And the last one is consequences of the conflict. This is a unique scheme of conflict development. Depending on duration, the conflicts are divided into short, long, and prolonged according to the time intervals. There are about ways how to solve these problems in conflict. There are 5 ways to resolve interpersonal conflicts. First one's competition. Competition means the desire to achieve satisfaction of the interest or to the prejudice the other person. The second one is adaptation. Adaptation means, in contrast to competition, sacrificing the interest for the sake of the other person. Comparison, it's a mutual interest of the both parties. The first one is avoidance. Avoidance, the main principle of avoidance is the absence of desire to cooperation and absence of desire to achieve own interest and aims. And the fifth one, the last one, is cooperation. Cooperation means search for an alternative decision completely satisfying the both parties, the both part of conflict. What about treatment processes? Organization of the treatment process requires the ability to communicate or prevent the situation which may cause conflict, as well as the ability to settle the conflict from all its participants, like patients, their relatives, doctors, paramedical personnel. In a medical team, every person has defined number of responsibilities, and it's very important in any specialties. One of the conditions which can prevent conflict in a hospital is strict observation of the rules of medical ethics and subordination. Thus, when young, for example, doctors start their career and begin to acquire the skills of practical work, the relations between them and their medical authorities, like chief doctor, like department chief, resemble the relation between the pupil and the teacher. When the stage of training is over, competition starts, and if it is not sound, conflict arises. The role of general group reaction of the medical staff to the patient is great, really great and very important. There are patients with whom everybody sympathizes. It is very easy to work with them. There are patients with whom it's more difficult to work, and the surrounding expresses negative feelings to them. It may become the cause of conflict. Psychological incapability can arise between the nurse and the patient, the doctor, relatives of the patient and the doctor, which impedes effective treatment. If they fail to change their relations, it is necessary to change the doctor or to change the nurse or just hospital. A good psychological climate in hospital is determined by a well-disposed attitude between all the participants of the treatment processes. It influences favorably the patients, provides more effective treatment. The arguments with the patients, with which some nurses allow showing their superiority are harmful, of course. One of the most important means of communication is speech and words, different words, yes. The addressed words to the patient influence him greatly. The doctor must think over every word when speaking to the patient. The environment in which the patient at the medical institution, individual mental characteristic of patient, his attitude to them are decisive in the process of treatment. The account of mental characteristics in the whole is an important condition of optimizing mutual activity of people and their relation in the treatment process. Each disease, except its typical clinical manifestation, is always accompanied by large or small changes in patient's mentality. Any disease, even if it is not accompanied by organic disturbances of the brain, influence of the patient's mentality. On the one hand, the clinical picture of mental changes, mental disorders, is determined by disease, and on another hand, by peculiarities of psychological characteristics of the patient. There are several characteristics or peculiarities of the patient with the internal disease. At acute awareness of the disease, a sense of confusion, fear of death appear in patients. Or at lingering illness, the mood is reduced, irritability and excitability appear. There is fear, there is anxiety or confusion in acute period of the disease in patient with a for example, rheumatism. In future, the mood is reduced, and in severe cases, flaccidity and apathy are changed by the appearance of locomotive, and speech can be changed to speech activities with underestimation of severity of disease, and not only disease can be its consequences too. The patient with, for example, the patient with progressive polyarthritis, suppressed and depressive. Such patients get on with each other badly. As opposite to this, the patient with Bechterew disease are remarkable. As a result, optimistic. They accept their fate with a smile, even at an immovable spinal column. And next form is hypertension. In hypertension, during the first stage, the majority of patients estimate their health condition adequately. They fulfill all doctors' prescriptions. People with anxious hypochondriac characters perceive increased arterial pressure as a catastrophe. They fix their attention on unhealthy sensation. A range of their interest is limited by the disease. In hypertension, some patients ignore the possibility of severe consequences and refuse from treatment, and they do not give up harmful habits. During the period of preceding to development of myocardial infarction, a sensation of vagueness in the head, difficulties in concentration of attention, presentiment of approaching danger, anxiety, melancholy. In some cases, euphoria appears. In acute period of myocardial infarction, the painful syndrome is accompanied by fear of death. During the recovery of the attention of patient is fixed on their sensations, they are hypochondriac. In bronchial asthma, the emotional tension promotes the region of asphyxia attacks. Moreover, the reaction at this to a considerable extent depends on particular of the person. Such patients often feel fear connected with waiting for another attack, especially for panic attack. In pneumonia, very acute and important now condition, yes? Pneumonia, when the temperature is rising, consciousness of patient can be disturbed. In acute pneumonia, in some patients, reduction of activity, hypodynamia, unsociability, unhealthy attitude to investigation and treatment are observed. In chronic lung disease, many patients feel reduction of mood, irritability. The intent is fixed on unpleasant sensation and a sort of incurability appears. The patient with chronic gastritis, yes, next group of patient. The patient with the chronic gastritis complains the weakness, reveal the activity in investigation, the treatment. Some of them are afraid of carcinoma of stomach. In peptic and duodenal ulcer, patients often go into disease, fixing their attention on unpleasant sensation. They feel fear of pains. They have loss of weight, gastric hemorrhage, diminution of efficiency, cause anxiety for life, sensation of hyperability. Non-specific ulcerative colitis is often accompanied by sense of melancholy, dissatisfaction with the fear of death. In chronic liver disease, such characteristics as dissatisfaction, irritable grumbling appear in patient nature. It is necessary to pay your attention, special attention to the patients with malignant neoplasms, because different mental reactions can develop according to the stage of disease. Thus, at the first stage, the mood, in the neoplasms, yes, the mood usually comes down in waiting of verdict. Attention is related to open sensation, results of investigation, doctor's words, and so on. When the diagnosis is known, there are effective reactions. The patient begins to fight with the approaching danger. Fatigability appears. The mood is calmed down, the sensation of pain becomes keen. Special attention and tact should be kept at contacts with the curable patients with specific forms of neoplasm. All trivialities must be taken into account. Personal and relatives have not to vessel. Telling the diagnosis to the patient in case of incurable disease is an important question, very important. It is necessary to have an individual approach with taking into consideration characterologic peculiarities of the patient. The patients with groundless, persistent fear of malignant neoplasm, which they think they have found, require a great psychotherapeutic work. The doctor must patiently and persuasively prove insolvency of patients suspicious. Such patient must not be ignored on no account, because a scornful doctor's attitude can finally persuade them in their trust, and it can lead to suicide, unfortunately. The next big question, psychological peculiarities of the patient with the surgical clinic. In this special, the techniques has achieved more perfection, both in sense of intervention and its equipment. Surgery and concentration of attention on surgical techniques and facilities sometimes leads to underestimation of patient's psychological state. In a number of cases, there is a cold, featureless atmosphere where the patient doesn't feel well. When the patient changes frequently and their personnel is in hurry, which is caused by emergency, it is not always possible to develop psychological relations between the medical personnel and the patients, of course. Moreover, the patient over-consider the surgeon as an ideal doctor who brings help by means of rapid energetic intervention, which is taken by the patient passively in patient passively. In surgery, the patient in surgeon's conduction, the patient promoted, the patient more than in other specialty is given to doctors specific power, especially when he is under narcosis during the operation and so on. Subjective feelings and patient's attitude to his own physical state, his physical condition, often play the most important role in the future life than the size of organic lesion. Sometimes patients refuse from operation. The cause of refusal are the patient has frightened by other patients who had endangered such intervention and telling about unpleasant impressions which they had felt heroically. They wanted to be in the center of attention and to call their astonishment. Similar operation has led to severe consequences, deformation or even death of the patient, relative and friends. The patient underestimates or denies his disease or light-mindedness, or to avoid misgivings or cares. For everything, the patient reacts by fear or misgiving. The question is often about a psychopathic and neurotic patient. Unpleasant own impressions of the previous operation, for example, For example, fear of narcosis, when many patients feel expressed fear of a sense of failing in the bottomless precipice and so on. So very common form of impressions. One of the most important stage is preparation to the operation. The surgeon should reveal interest and ability to estimate the role of the disease and operation in the patient's life and his future, of course. It is very important to listen. It is very important to listen his misgivings and wishes. Some patients are afraid of unconsciousness and helplessness caused by narcosis. They feel fear of not waking up, suffocating, disclosing their secrets, telling nonsense, becoming funny. Such mood is sometimes strengthened by other people who tell about their impressions, which they had felt. Some patients unfavorably say that narcosis had not produced any effect, and they were operated being in clear consciousness. Sometimes, because of ignorance, they take local and lumbar anesthesia for general one. The post-operative course becomes difficult due to such circumstance, as a bad contact of patient with the personnel, the patient's incapacity to express his condition by means of the words unfavorable vital and family situation, which can complicate the operation's results. Bad ability, his emotional immaturity, a weak or unbalanced type of temper, neurotic features of the patient character. Elderly people adapt worse to the changes. They are more afraid of death. They found heal slowly. Their postoperative complications develop frequently. They last for a long time. They also have brain disorders with the disturbances of blood supply and metabolism. They long for visitors who must be admitted to the patients, and they get acquaintance of their belonging. The nurse should arrange with the patient's relatives which things are necessary for the patient. For instance, for example, eyeglasses, hearing apparatus, etc. In spite of strict demands of hygienic regimen in surgical department, these requirements can be satisfied. Sorry. And the last question, peculiarity of contact with the mentally ill patient. The attitude to mentally ill people must be the same as to the other patients. Of course, it must be polite, benevolent, must feel correct, affable. Speaking to such patient, it is necessary to listen attentively to the patient's complaints, even if they seem absurd as to manifestation of the disease. It is impossible to show rudeness. It is impossible to show contempt, mockery to the patient. The doctor should get out exist of society prejudices with regards to mental illness. It is necessary to remember that in some patients there is absence of understanding of disease, and to carry out the urgent hospitalization or understanding of this hospitalization to the psychiatry department and to treat them without agreement or sometimes in spite of their demands. It requires tact and patience. It is recommended to talk with the relatives calmly, softly, to convince them in necessity of treatment or in outpatient or in inpatient departments. In psychiatric clinic, it is very necessary to keep vigilance, to see that the patient do not make any actions threatening to health and life of the patients or surrounding people. In contact with the mentally ill, it is necessary to convince us, but not to deceive them. So this was the last one last one part of our lecture. If you have some question, you can ask me. If you don't have any question, I wish you good luck and see you next lecture after 2 weeks.
No questions, doctor. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, madam. До свидания.
Goodbye.